everyone can take not everyone can take APs and the highest level classes in every single class. Some people can, but most people can't. So where do they put their foot on the gas and take, maybe challenge themselves in a class? Where do they pull off a little bit, which shows both their aptitude and their interest? The next place we see to where that personal narrative is how do they spend their time when they're not in school? Is it formal? Do they do formal clubs? Do they have hobbies? Are they working? How do they choose to spend their time? Because that shows what are they interested in? What are they excited about? The other place we look at in the application to determine a personal narrative is in recommendations. So all counselors have to write a recommendation for a student. So that's one place. And then we have students request teachers. And so what do the teachers say about the student? And then the last place is the essays. When a student actually has their own opportunity to talk about what's important to them, what they're passionate about. So those are the places where we find what makes a student them.
Kristen, I'm wondering if you ever have kids that come to you and the parent too, and they say, I just don't know, I'm just kind of average. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if there's anything unique about me. Do you ever, well, we're talking about assessments next, but do you ever
Sure,
give them an assessment or how do you figure that out and help them
definitely.
determine it?
Absolutely. And it breaks my heart a little bit, but I can tell you more often than not, a student comes to me and says, "Well, I don't really have anything special about me, or I'm not really interesting." And I'm like, that is absolutely not the case. You just haven't really taken the time to think about what you're excited about. So when I get students, I give them that we have a number of assessments tools at Educational Connections. One of them is for those people who know what a Myers-Briggs personality test is. We give them a modified Myers-Briggs. And then we have another test that I really love. It's called an intelligence test. It doesn't test intelligence, it shows what kind of learner you are. And the two tests together give really interesting insight into a student. And I absolutely love it because two different things happen when I give them the assessments. It either substantiates things that they're already doing, which they didn't even realize. They may be involved in some clubs or they're working or they're taking certain classes and they may not realize, but that's already telling a story about them. They already have a narrative going that they didn't even know they had. And then the other thing that's exciting that sometimes happens is that students learn that they have things that they're interested in that they didn't even know about, or they have talents and aptitudes that they didn't even think about. And then we kind of capitalize on those and think and explore ways to elevate that in their lives and then eventually in their applications.
Kristen, does the AchieveWorks assessment also help them with a major or kind of choose what
It
they might?
can.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because encompassed in that whole thing of your personal narrative is that academic work. So what are you interested in? What are you talented about? What are you talented in? What are your kind of future goals, both in college and post grad? And so we have those conversations. It's an ongoing conversation that we have with students. And I also say, listen, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to explore, but these are the things that we're doing now, and it helps define kind of a path for when we go to apply to colleges.
So you're talking about defining you as you and kind of like your personal narrative. How can you use the summer? Like we're right at the cusp of the summer, May 1st. How do you use the summer to accentuate you?
Absolutely. So I always say to my students, first of all, I want you to enjoy your summer. It's a wonderful time to decompress, to relax, to rejuvenate. It also is just gives us the luxury of time to explore things that we just don't have time to do during the school year. So this is a time, first of all, and we're going to talk a little bit about it later on, but to do some test prep. This is also a time to explore things that you're interested in. So I had a student, um, she took the personal assessments and she is a softball player. And she also coaches a softball team and she's also involved in Best Buddies at her school. And she was kind of grappling with, I don't necessarily know what I think I want to do in college or what I want to major in. And so we did the assessments and it really aligned. The personality showed that she was the defender, which is a personality that just aligns perfectly with going into teaching. And it also showed in her intelligences that she was incredibly empathetic and nurturing. And so she's like, I actually think that may be an area I want to explore. So we took the summer and she ended up coaching another team. She ended up taking a neuroscience class on her own to try to understand a little bit about how the mind works. She signed up to take the Teachings for Tomorrow's class at her school the next year. And this was a couple of summers ago. And now this summer, she's actually got an internship at a speech language therapy facility, and she's really embraced this idea of maybe wanting to go into teaching and education during this when she goes to college. So that's an idea of where she took the summer and she really used it. So getting a summer job is wonderful. A lot of students will apologize to me. They'll be like, well, I just work at Chick-fil-A or I'm just working at Harris Teeter. I'm like, that's fantastic. Having a job shows responsibility, maturity, ability to work with other people. Colleges love seeing jobs. I have another student, he has this Pokemon trading card little side hustle that he's got going on, which is I didn't realize that Pokemon cards, you can get so much money for them. I wish I would have kept my son's Pokemon cards from years ago. But he is going to really kind of scale that this summer a little bit. And he thinks he's interested in business. So that perfectly aligns with that. Summer is also a wonderful time to volunteer more, to really lean into that. Because when I was at UVA, I can tell you that it was a really non-negotiable for me if a student wasn't giving back to their community in some form or fashion. So volunteering over the summer is a wonderful thing. If your student is interested in environmental studies, hey, maybe Fairfax County has trail cleanups where you take away the invasive species. That could be something fun to do. It's also a wonderful time to enroll in summer programs like I talked about. And the last thing that summer is wonderful for is also to start exploring colleges, both doing research and also visiting schools. So I always say summer is truly the most important time of the year to really be leaning into this college admissions process.
I love these ideas, Kristen. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
that. All right, so we talked about the summer, but let's talk a little bit about building your list, putting together all the colleges that you may be interested in. And I know that you are a believer about fit, not just will that college accept me, but am I a fit for this college? Is this going to be a great place for me to attend? Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I always say to my students, their job is to determine if a school is a fit for them. It's my job to determine whether it's a match. So I never want my students, at least in the early phase, to be sitting there going, well, I don't know if I can get into this school, or I don't think I can get into that school. That's not what I'm most concerned about when we are starting to explore colleges. Finding a school is a fit is seeing a school like, can you envision yourself there? There's a number of things to look at when you're looking at to see if the school is a fit. The first thing is academic. Now, that makes the most sense. Is it the school academic environment something that's conducive to me? Like, do I want to be in a place that has large lecture halls with lots of students in them, where then you break out into discussion sessions that maybe a TA is running? Or do I want a smaller student environment where I have a little bit more accessibility to professors? How does the school feel about undergraduates using access to labs and research? What type of internship opportunities are available to me? What is the student faculty ratio? Those are all things to look at for an academic fit. And of course, most importantly, is do they have the majors that I think I may be interested in? Do they allow me the academic freedom to have cross pollination? Like, can I explore philosophy and also explore English at the same time? Or what does that look like for me? Because sometimes, depending on the college you're looking at, you don't have as much flexibility or to explore different subjects. Do they have an exploratory major if that's what I'm interested in? So academic fit is super important. The next thing to look at for fit is campus environment and community. Like, do I want a big school? Do I want a small school? How far do I want to be from home? Do I want to be in the middle of a city where I can take advantage of cultural opportunities? Or do I want to be in kind of the movie set college environment with quads and grass and all those things? Another thing to take a look at when you're looking at schools is the daily life of the student. Like, how do the students spend their weekends? Is that something that how I want to spend my weekends? Do they have the clubs and activities that I'm interested in participating in? Those types of things. Another thing about fit that a lot of students overlook is financial. So at some point, having conversations with your student about, what does that look like for us as a family in terms of paying for college? That's a super important conversation to have and one to talk about with regards to fit. And then lastly is kind of that intangible, I call it like the vibe check. Like when you go to that campus and you sit in the quad and you watch students go by, or you go to the student union or sit in the dining hall, like how does it feel? What does that aura seem like? Is this something that aligns with what I want? So those are all questions to ask yourself when you're trying to determine a fit for a school.
That makes sense, Kristen. And another thing is like, how will that college support my student? What is their accommodations policy like? What are the different levels of help that they can get? Tell us a little bit more about that.
100%. This is super, super important. So every college by law has to have a support services. Sometimes they call it a disability services or a student life services department where they have accommodations available to students. That's time and a half, or if someone needs special note taking, or they need to provide special accommodations for a student. Sometimes it's housings. I've had students in the past who need special housing accommodations. So every school has to have that center. But there are different levels to support that colleges provide. So after the initial kind of general accommodations that colleges have to have, some of them provide what we call advanced support. And that can include counseling sessions, special one-on-one tutoring that they offer, executive functioning skill workshops, those types of more advanced level accommodations. There are schools such as American University. Fairleigh Dickinson has an entire ADHD department. So looking to see what resources are available for your student if they need those is super important. So when students and parents go to visit schools, I always say, please stop by that office to make sure that they have the things that you need. And then the last thing is there are some schools that have what we call even further comprehensive support, where they literally have programs. Sometimes it requires another application or even additional money, like the University of Arizona's SALT program or St. Joe's University. I had a student a number of years ago. They have an autism center that went there for specifically to have the availability of that center for them. So if your student even requires even additional support, making sure that that school has that, what they need for them to set them up for success is super important.
Thanks for that, Kristen. And if you're interested in learning more about support levels at universities, we have a whole blog all about this. You can go to our website at ectutoring.com/college-ADHD and read more about those support services. All right. So, what about balancing your list? What about figuring out, okay, what are the reach schools? What are the target? What are my likely? How do you do that?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I said to my students, this is what my job is. I don't want that to be their job. But students, they just have a propensity to look at that themselves. But first of all, because college admissions is not an exact science, I always say to my students, every school on that list must be a school that you would attend, that you're actually excited about. It's a waste of their time and family's money to be applying to schools that you literally have no intention to going to. So making sure that that list, first of all, every school you're excited about on that. But then having what I call a balanced list is making, and I think most people have heard about these categories of reach schools, target schools, and safety schools. I actually like to start with the safety schools first with my students. I think it's super important to make sure that those that on your list that you are really excited about and they tick all your boxes. And what is usually called a safety, I use the word most likely versus safety, is that your academic profile, which means your GPA and testing if you choose to submit, falls above or right about the 75th percentile of students who are accepted to that school. Then you want to make sure that you have some target schools, and that is where your testing, if you choose to submit, and your GPA fall within about the 50% of students who are accepted to the school. And then you always want to have some reaches too. And those are if a school has a low acceptance rate, so we're talking, below 15%-ish down into those single digits, it's a reach for everybody. So that would be a reach school. And then if your academic profile is below that 50%, that would be considered more of a reach. It's 25 to 50% considered more of a reach. So having that balanced list is super important.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, every day parents are calling our office looking for help with the admissions process. And one of the things we see right away when we say, oh, tell us about the schools you're considering is they tend to be real top heavy.
Yes.
Students have a lot of schools in their reach category, but not a lot in their target and likely.
Correct. That happens all the time. And it actually reminds me, I had a parent a few months ago, and he's like, well, we're just going to go see all the reach schools, and then we'll figure out the safety, down the road later on. And I'm like, actually, you kind of have that backwards. I really want us to focus on those safety and target schools. And then, sure, you want to apply to, high flying Ivies or whatever, sure, go right ahead. But I really want to focus and make sure that we've got those targets and most likelies that are schools that your child is excited about.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, now we all agree that not everybody is going to be applying to colleges, or sometimes we have students that come to us that are applying to colleges, but they're also looking at alternative paths.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about those options for kids?
Sure, absolutely. Besides my mantra of making sure the saying that there's a college for everyone is my mantra that I want you to have options. And what that looks like looks different for every student. A 4-year university straight out of high school isn't necessarily the right path for everybody. It may never be the right path for someone, but there are so many other options that are available to students. So when I have a family where the student's like, I don't necessarily know if college is really what I want to do at this point. And I say to them, you don't know how you're going to feel this day, May 1st of your senior year. So let's have options. So we may explore applying to some 4 years, but then we also look at alternative pathways, and that can include community college. Nova is an amazing school that all the people on this webinar have access to. And in fact, if your student is taking any dual enrollment classes, you've already had that experience with Nova. So community colleges are fabulous. And a lot of people don't realize that 31 states in this country have what's called a guaranteed admissions pathway to 4-year state universities in their state. So what that means, that is if a student goes to a Nova community college or another community college in Virginia for 2 years, and they take a prescribed curriculum, which is pretty much a general curriculum. I used to evaluate transfer students at UVA as well. If they take the courses that they're supposed to take, and they get a GPA, which I believe is somewhere, it varies per state university, but somewhere around like a 3.2-ish to 3.4-ish range, they are guaranteed admission to any school in the state. UVA, William & Mary, Virginia Tech, JMU, George Mason, you name it, any state university, they are guaranteed admission. I think that is an amazing, fabulous path that is available to so many people that they don't take advantage of. So that's the one way with regards to community colleges. The other thing is there are agreements where you can see where your the courses that you've taken other places, how those will apply to a 4-year college. Then there's also trade schools. Trade schools are really up and coming nowadays. There's so many wonderful career pathways that one can explore through a trade school. And then there's always a gap year. I have a number of students in the past few years where, we apply to the 4-year schools, they get into some schools, they even ones that they're excited about, but they feel like they're just not ready to make that, to just go straight into into a 4-year program. So they defer admission for a year, and we plan out a thoughtful gap year, which can include work, include volunteer work, include some travel, include some maybe enrichment courses, although you have to be careful. You can't take too many college classes because now you've kicked yourself out of being a first year and now you're a transfer student. But there are wonderful ways to have a super enriching gap year. and then go to college when you feel a little bit ready. So I always love working with students in terms of identifying alternative paths for them.
Love that, Kristen. I love helping kids have options. And I
Mhm.
know you and everyone else on our team of 6 college counselors work with kids every day, one to one. But there's also some really great resources for parents out there. Tell us a little bit about them.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many resources out there, and the internet is your friend. First of all, there are resources, we talked about support services. There are a number of specific websites and books that are geared to people, families with students with learning differences, and helping them identify colleges that will be fits for them. There are so many resources just to research colleges. We use an Educational Connections, this College Planner Pro, which is a really super friendly, user friendly tool to research colleges. But there are also, the College Board has their own website with tons of information. If you're in Fairfax County, you have either School Links or you have Naviance that, or you have SCORE if you're in private schools that offer lots of resources available to you. So there is just a lot of information out there at your fingertips to help provide your student with the information they need to determine schools that are a fit for them.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. And we put all
Mhm.
those resources on that one page that I mentioned earlier, ectutoring.com/college-ADHD. Okay, so let's go forward to the Common App. Tell
Mhm.
us what this is, why it's important, especially this time of year.
Sure. So the common application is literally what it means, just one standard application. It is accepted by over 1,000 universities in the United States. So tons of universities, most universities accept the common application. And so when at EC, when we're working with students, we help them through every single phase of the common application. There are 6 sections to the common application: profile, family, education, testing, activities, and then the essay or personal statement. And we walk through students through the entire process. I can't tell you how many times I'm literally sitting on Zoom with a student and we are answering every question together if they need that type of support. But the majority of our work is spent on the activity section and then the personal statement, or what people call the essay. And we have, having done these for so many years, it's one thing to have a really strong personal narrative with activities and courses and interesting hobbies, but it's another thing to how you package that in your application. And I can't tell you more times than not where a student can have those things, but they don't frame it in a really cohesive story so that an admissions counselor can answer those questions that I said that I did when I was at UVA, which is, what will this student bring to my college environment? What contribution can they make? How will they be at my university? So we use the common application to package that student and elevate that narrative for universities to be able to answer that question. So we spend an inordinate amount of time on the activity section and obviously on the essay or personal statement. There's also an area on the common application, especially for students who have learning differences or have had personal challenges, where you can talk about that, talk about how that journey has affected you, how it has shaped your perspective. And those are really interesting ways. We use it as a celebration versus like an excuse or as something to be ashamed of. And then the other part that's in the common application is the college specific applications. They actually don't open until August 1st, but you can work on the common application. And I'm currently working with my juniors already on it now. And then the common app shuts down for a couple days, the end of July, and it rolls over to the new cycle. So you can be working on everything in the common app except don't put an essay in there and don't start working on the college specific applications because those things do change. But everything else remains the same and you can start as soon as you want. You can open your account and get going.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kristen. Let's switch gears to testing. You mentioned earlier that it's kind of making a comeback,
Mm-hmm.
yet there are a lot of schools that are test optional. There's so many choices. How does a parent know?
Sure, absolutely. And it testing can be daunting. Nobody likes to talk about it. Not many people really like to do it. But it just is, as I talked about, that academic fit, it is just another piece of that puzzle that we like students to explore. And so colleges accept both the SAT and the ACT. They're two separate tests. Anne is going to talk about the differences in a second about them. All colleges accept both. They don't care which one that you take. We have our students at Educational Connections that once you've gotten yourself through a good portion or all of Algebra 2, we start thinking about either one of those tests. And I always say to my students, because a lot of students are like, I'm just a really bad test taker and I hate taking tests. I'm like, you know what? We give it a go. We do that. We try, we do our best. We see what our scores look like. And then depending on where you apply, you want to apply to college, I will give you recommendations and advice on whether you should submit your scores or not. If a school is truly test optional, they can't penalize a student for not submitting scores. Am I going to sit here and say it's not helpful to submit a score? Sure, it absolutely is helpful to submit a score. And there are schools that do require testing. If you're applying to any state university in Florida, if you're applying to the University of Georgia or Ohio State, they require testing. If you're applying to a Purdue, they are test preferred, which means that the majority of students they accept are going to have testing. But there still are a lot of schools out there where it is still optional. So our philosophy is, you know what? We give it a go, we try our best, and then we see where we're applying and we make the decision whether to submit or not to submit.
All right, so to that point, Kristen, let's talk a little bit about the timeline. And
Mm-hmm.
the first thing kids need to do is to secure their accommodations.
100%. I can't tell you how much this is important. I have had so many instances where parents will be like, well, we have an IEP, we have a 504. I just assume we had accommodations with College Board or with ACT, and that is not the case. The guidance counselor has to apply for accommodations for like if you need time and a half, or you need to have special note taking, or a special, you need hearing, you need to be audio in order to take the test. Like the guidance counselor must fill out the paperwork and apply for those accommodations. And if your student does have an IEP or a 504, it is a game changer to have accommodations. So please do it. Please, there's no reason your child should not be having their accommodations just like they have in school. They should have them for taking this test. So that's the first thing. And then, as I said before, we like our students to start preparing after they've taken Algebra 2, or at least have gotten through the majority of Algebra 2 if they're a junior taking Algebra 2, so gotten through at least half the year in that. And then I always say to my students, I want you to be done with testing before you enter senior year. First of all, I want you to enjoy your senior year. It should be your most rigorous program of courses. You're going to have things to do. You're going to have things to do with your application. So I like to have my students done with testing by there's an end of August exam for the SAT, there's a beginning of September exam for the ACT. In a perfect world, I like them to be done by then. And I
But
like
they
my
can
students.
still take them in the fall, right, Kristen?
Of course, they can absolutely take them in the fall. Like we always go for the best case scenario, and then if we have if a student is like, I really think I want to give it another go, and there are schools that offer a free exam in October, absolutely. But I don't want to have to rely on that if possible.
Mhm. That makes sense. And so let's talk a little bit about this concept of super scoring,
Mm-hmm.
where colleges will look at maybe two tests and take the top scores from both of those tests and combine them into one new, better score.
Right.
It kind of speaks to, you mentioned as a minimum, take one test. And in Fairfax County, kids are really used to the PSAT. And many times they've taken it as sophomore, a junior. And so it's kind of part of what they know. And so an easy thing would just be to take an SAT. Sometimes parents will say, oh, my child didn't really do well on the PSAT at all. And then we'll say, you know what, go ahead and take a practice ACT and see how you do. Maybe that's the better test for the student. But regardless, they need to sit for one test, one actual test, so they have that test score. But when you super score, you have to have two tests. Do you
Mm-hmm.
ever have kids that you'll have them take the second test just so they can have that super score?
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely recommend that you take it more than once. We usually the first time is kind of that baseline score because even when you take the PSAT or you take a practice test, I mean, it's not as the same as being in that room taking that first real test. So we definitely want them to take at least one. And then once you get the score back from that baseline, you can see, hey, maybe I can brush up a little bit on geometry, or maybe I need to work a teeny bit on my vocab. And you can do a little bit more focused concentrated prep, and then definitely take it a second time. A lot of people ask me, they're like, well, if we take it two or three times or even four times, like our colleges are going to see that and that's going to look bad. No, absolutely not. Colleges, there are only a few colleges, first of all, where you have to submit all your scores. And they also, if they super score, they truly don't care how many times you've taken it. They're only looking at the top scores for the SAT and then the top sectional scores that make up the composite in the ACT. So there really is no stigma in how many times you take it. I mean, obviously, their testing fatigue may set in at some point, but I don't want people to feel like that's a limiting factor.
Yeah, I like that idea for kids who may not be great test takers, to take it twice because then they're going to have an even better score and that can definitely
Absolutely.
help them. So
Absolutely.
let's dive deeper into a comparison of the SAT and ACT. They've certainly the ACT more recently has changed a lot. We're not going to go into all of the details because there's a lot to unpack. But we have a basic comparison chart, and you can read more on our website, which is ectutoring.com/test dash prep about both of these tests. So, Kristen, we've talked about testing, we've talked about that personal narrative. Part
Mhm.
of that narrative is the college essay or the personal statement. And parents often say, well, what does my child write about? Can you kick us off
Right.
here?
Sure, absolutely. And so, first of all, I want people to, and I always say this to my students, like, give yourself some grace. There's so much talk and noise out there about the college essay that I think people get really anxious about it. I always say to my students, you have done the hard work. What you have done for the last 3 years in and out of the classroom is far going to outweigh this one statement that you're going to say. Can it help? Sure, absolutely. Does it help kind of bring that narrative, tie a nice bow on it? Sure. Does it give you the opportunity to provide further insight into you? Absolutely. But people put so much weight on the fact that they're like, well, the essay is either going to get me in or not get me in. And that's actually not the case because as we talked about earlier, remember the foundation is that academic fit and then it's everything else. So the college essay, it's really a misnomer to call it an essay. We call it an essay just kind of for shortness of words, but it really is a personal narrative. It's a story. I always say to my students, this is not an essay you write in school. This is truly a story. And it's only 650 words, which is only like a page and a half. It's not very long. So you also can't do a ton with it. And then students sometimes feel like, well, I have to say something really earth-shattering. And I had one student once say to me, I heard I have to write about a trauma and I don't have a trauma. And I'm like, first of all, who told you you had to write about a trauma? Because that's not true. And then I've had other students come and say, well, I'm not supposed to write about sports. And I said, again, who told you that? If your experience in athletics is a defining factor of your life and has really helped shape who you are and how you think, you could absolutely write about sports. There is truly no topic that I don't think a student can use. The topic is actually kind of the vessel that takes the reader on the journey, that tells you about yourself. So the topic can really be anything. I had a student 2 years ago write about digging a hole in the sand, digging a hole in the sand. And you say, oh my gosh, like that is so weird. And why would you use that opportunity to talk about that? But he used the opportunity of digging a hole in the sand to take the reader on a journey where he talked about kind of having an open mindedness and how it shaped his perspective in life because he actually hated the beach. And he went to the beach. He had to go to the beach every year with his family, and he sat in the rental unit and he was bored and miserable. And one day he decided to go and sit on the beach and he started digging a hole. And as he was digging the hole in the sand, he realized that, this isn't so bad. And kind of how I've really been kind of dumb and closed myself off to all these experiences because I had this feeling I hated the beach. And then he took that philosophy and applied that in other parts of his life, and it's kind of has defined how he lives his life going forward. But the topic was really just pretty basic, but he used it to really show a big part of himself. Another example is I had a student, she was in all the clubs, did all the things, but she loved to bake. And she ended up writing her essay on perfecting the perfect buttercream frosting recipe. And she used that process of talking about, the trial and error of fixing this recipe to talk about the beauty in making mistakes and in going off on the not beaten path in terms of not following a recipe and developing her own, and how she used that experience to kind of shape a philosophy in life that she's used in other ways. So those are ways to talk about just topics that people have talked about. And so the biggest thing and the kiss of death I always find is when a student comes to me and they say, well, what should I write about? And I said, well, right there and then, if you say, what should I write about? What does this admissions person want me to write about? You've already, that's just not the way, it's not the way to go about this, because they're looking for an authentic voice. They're looking for you to talk about you, what's important to you. When I have students, the first thing when we start brainstorming topics, I say to them is, if you met a stranger and you only had 5 minutes with them, what would you want them to know about you? So when they walked away, they would say, you know what, I have a little bit of a better idea of who Jane is, or what's important to her, or what she's been through. So that's really what this is about, this personal statement.
It's funny, Kristen, talking about the personal statement. When I did a webinar a few months back with Renee, and she has a background in admissions at an engineering school, as you know, and we were talking about a common essay that she saw, which is about Legos. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of kids applying to engineering or math and science
Yep.
schools, they loved Legos as kids. It's pretty
Yep.
common. So they all
Mm-hmm.
want to write a Lego essay. And since it's so common, she works with them to fine tune it, to take it like in a different direction,
Right.
so that it's unique to them. And I'm wondering if you ever find that, like kids that have a common topic, but you help them modify it so it is special to them.
Absolutely. And it's so true what you and Renee were talking about with regards to Legos, but also puzzles, using puzzles for engineering. That's always something that a lot of engineering students use. But I have a student just I've thought about this past year who is a musician. She's a violinist and she wants to go into engineering. And so her essay was talking about music. And if you take music and you kind of break it down to a granular level, it's about pieces coming together, like in an orchestra to make a product, or even the notes coming together. So she used music to get across her interest in engineering because it's kind of the same skill set. It's just a different topic. So, but a lot of people, and this is where people say, well, like, I don't think I have anything special, but how would you ever think about being in an orchestra and playing the violin, and how that has helped you realize your passion for engineering? And so again, that's why, as we talked about at the beginning of the webinar, being creative and thinking outside of the box is so important. Because first of all, I can promise you, most admissions officers have seen pretty much everything at this point if they've been in the business long enough in terms of reading essays. So it's really the journey that you take the person on that's important.
Mm. I love that, Kristen. One thing that we often see with kids that have been diagnosed with ADHD or a learning difference is that they want to write about that. And
Mm-hmm.
parents will say, well, should they disclose that? Should they not? What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really personal, as we talked about, this whole process is very individualized, and this is a really personal decision. The first thing I want to dispel off the bat is that there is no stigma attached to having a learning difference. I find students who have learning differences are different, have had different challenges or such in their life, super interesting actually. And if you remember when we talked at the beginning, colleges are in their business of building communities. Imagine how dynamic a classroom or a community is when you have a student who has had some different experiences than other people. That's what makes it vibrant and interesting. So with regards to disclosing anything of that nature, the first and foremost thing is if the student is comfortable with it. They have to have a level of comfort. And if they don't feel comfortable with it, then I would say not to talk about it. But if they do feel comfortable talking about it, then absolutely in that section, there's an additional information section in the Common Application where you're given 250 words where you can talk about either different challenges, personal challenges you've been through your life, or you can talk about if you've had learning differences or maybe mental health issues or whatever. And that's an area to do it. And I always, if my students feel comfortable talking about it, then we talk about it in more of a celebration way. In fact, this is what I've been through. This is what I've learned from it. This is how I'm proud of myself and how I celebrate my difference. So that's where you can do it. So the first and foremost thing I would say to parents is talk to your student about if they're comfortable talking about it.
That makes sense, Kristen. Another way kids can help with the process and help their chances is something called demonstrated interest. Can you share a little bit about what it is and how it can give kids an advantage?
Absolutely. It literally is what it's saying, showing interest, demonstrating interest in a school. There are a lot of schools out there, and you can find this on their common data set, whether they factor, demonstrate showing interest in their school into the college admissions process. There are a lot of schools that don't, but there are a lot of schools that do. And for those that do, I always tell my students, this is low-hanging fruit. We want to check in this box. And that means going and visiting the school, taking a tour, if you taking a virtual tour or session or panel on the internet, signing up for their emails, opening their emails, following them on social media if you have it. I think one of the most important ways to show demonstrated interest is in the fall when the colleges on your list come to your high school. Go to those information sessions. The probability is the person who's giving that information session is the person who is reading your application. So go introduce yourself, ask them a question, follow up with an email. I can't tell you how many times I was at UVA, despite the thousands and thousands of applications that they got. There would be an admissions person who would say, "Oh yeah, I remember meeting Susie at McLean High School." Just being able to put a name with a face, even if a school doesn't factor demonstrated interest like UVA, can really be invaluable. And then one of the most important ways to show demonstrated interest is if you apply early decision, which means you are, shooting your shot with that school. You're saying, if you accept me, I will 100% go. In fact, it's a contractual obligation between you, the school, your parent, and the guidance counselor. So if you apply early decision, you are showing definitely demonstrated interest. There are also some schools that offer interviews. William and Mary is a school that has interviews, and I have all my students do their interview during the summer just because there's more time for that.
Kristen, when we think of kids applying to college, one of the unspoken realities is that it's a lot of work, and kids' executive function skills, I personally think, it's the one time in their life until they're at this age that they've been taxed the most. It's just incredibly difficult to juggle everything together. How do you help kids get it done when they think it's so overwhelming?
Sure. And you're right. There are so many balls in the air in applying to colleges. And so we break it down. It's one step at a time. And that's why if you do have if people on the webinar today have juniors, starting as soon as possible, break it down into small steps. We use a lot of tools at Educational Connections to help students. I mean, even students without learning differences, it is daunting and overwhelming. And we break it down, and I use, and everyone, all our counselors at Educational Connections use the summer. It is a very, very important time because you just have the luxury of time for those people who are going into their senior year. I have had plenty of students who go into senior year and they're done. They finish their application. I make sure that all my students have their common application done at least over the summer, but I do have students who are done with all their applications before they head back senior year. So breaking it down into small steps, I think is most important.
Yeah, I bet that is such an amazing feeling to go into your senior year and knowing, this is awesome.
Absolutely.
And we put together an ebook for you on all about the process specific to kids with ADHD. And you can download that at ectutoring.com/college-ADHD. And if we can ever help you, if you would like to talk to us to see if what we offer is a match for your child, we are more than happy to have a conversation. You can share with us about your student. We can share about our services and see if it's a match for what you're looking for. We offer programs that are all virtual for kids starting in 8th grade through their senior year. And you can scan this QR code, or you can just go to our website at EC Tutoring, and there's a drop down for Get Started, and you can schedule a call with any of us. All right, so Kristen, I would love to go to the Q&A right now. And
Sure.
Amal, I think that we probably have some questions there. Should I,
Yes,
you want to
we
come back on
we
and share
do.
those?
Yes, I would love first to thank you for the very amazing presentation and all the information shared that can help a lot of families. And we do have some questions in the chat, so I will begin with those, and then I will let you see what we have in the Q&A. Also, I have posted in the chat a link for the evaluation for the webinar. Please feel free to complete that evaluation. Your opinion is very important for us. And all the other resources that have been posted in the chat will be sent out with the recording and the slides that have been shared today. So the first question is, what GPA do they have to keep to guarantee admission?
From the guaranteed admissions agreements for the community colleges. So each in Virginia, each university has a different GPA that they require. Excuse me, call. And for engineering, even for like Virginia Tech, it's a different GPA. So you can Google guaranteed admissions agreement for the universities that you're interested in, and you can see what that GPA is exactly for that university.
Okay. Do you have multilingual staff to work with students and families that speak other languages?
I don't know if any of our college counselors speak another language, but generally we work with students. It's, between the counselor and the student. So if they're able to speak English, then we can absolutely work it out with the student.
Thank you. Do you have suggestions for students who are poor test taker, especially with the grading policies of 70% on assessment?
Do you mean poor test takers with the SOLs or with the SAT and ACT, Amal?
It doesn't mention, but please, Audora, please explain in the chat if you wish. You have already, yeah, because the question says, especially with the grading policy of 70% on assessment, and she does not mention what kind of assessment. If you can do, it will be helpful so we can reply to your question.
And Amal, we can go back to that one too if you'd like.
Okay. Okay, could you say something about applying to universities overseas? Do you have resources on that?
Sure, absolutely. I help students all the time apply overseas. They don't use the common application. Colleges, international universities, the timelines are different for colleges overseas. They're normally later, a lot of January deadlines, even later than that. But everyone at EC, all our college consultants have worked with students in applying to universities overseas.
Thank you. Wonderful. Someone was asking if you can repeat when can students start working in the Common App, ninth or 10th grade, beginning of the 8th, 11th grade?
Sure. So if your student is a current junior, they can open their Common Application account now and start working on the various sections. Profile, family, education, testing. They probably want to keep until they're done with testing and then deciding whether they're going to submit testing or not. So they probably want to leave that blank. And then I suggest working on the activities portion and then, of course, the personal narrative not in the Common App, but like in a Google Doc until you get it finalized, and then you can cut and paste it into the Common Application. If you're younger than a junior, you can still open your account and you can like look around at it and stuff like that. I wouldn't recommend starting to fill it out though until you're in your junior year.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have some clarification. She said all kind of, for the question that we have previously, it says all tests in general.
I
All
don't,
the
in terms
assessments.
of the SOLs, I don't believe that's reported on the transcript, is it, Kristen?
SOLs? No, no, they don't look at PSATs, they don't look at SOLs. The only testing that colleges care about are either the ACT, the SAT, and then if you take AP classes and you choose to submit your AP scores. Those are the only standardized tests they care about.
Yes, she said actually, we do have more explanation tests in classes that impact grades, not the SOLs.
So colleges are only going to get the official transcript from the end of junior year, which will have your cumulative GPA on it, and then all your grades, your final grades from your 3 years of high school. So that's what colleges use to factor into determining if you're an academic fit for the university. They don't see, final exam scores, nothing like that. They only care about your grades and then if you're taking these standardized tests.
Perfect, thank you. We have a question about the resources available for students without a strong financial footing to defray the cost of applications.
Sure. So financial aid is a whole beast in and of itself. I help my students with regards. There's two types of aid. There's need-based aid based on your family's income, and then there's what's called merit aid, which is based on a student's, academic performance. And so, if you are looking for need-based aid, the gateway to that is the FAFSA, which opens in October of senior year. And as soon as it opens, I recommend that parents, that the student has an account, the parent has an account, and you fill that out. And then depending on where you want to apply to college, I have all my students look at the financial aid page of the colleges they are applying to because each school has a different requirements in terms of what documentation they require and also different deadlines. So for need-based aid, you need to look for that. Most colleges, you don't have to do anything additional to apply for merit aid. They do that automatically. They consider that when you submit your application, but there are some schools that there is additional merit aid. So again, on that financial aid page, you can see all of those types of things. I have a lot of people ask me, like, when can I start applying for scholarships? Scholarship season doesn't usually happen until senior year and usually starts in later fall. There is literally a scholarship for everything. I could get a scholarship for wearing a maroon shirt today. There are so many scholarships out there. I recommend students go to their guidance office. They have tons of information on local scholarships. And then there are a bunch of search engines on the internet that give you access to hundreds of scholarships out there that a student can apply for.
Hey, thank you. What are the advantage of graduating with an advanced diploma?
So there is the advantage of graduating with an advanced diploma is that you have the coursework that is attractive to colleges. So colleges are looking in a perfect scenario, colleges are looking for students to take the 5 academic core subjects, math, English, science, social studies, and foreign language, all the way through senior year. And that will get students through an advanced diploma. So that's what colleges are looking for. Now, then you have to put real life in and then your child's individual journey. And sometimes, they can't get through the 4 years of foreign language. They hate it. They're not doing well in it, whatever. And they just make through the requirement for graduation. So, as I said, a good rule of thumb is they want to see the 5 core subjects all the way through high school. And then you got to put in what your students bandwidth and how they're doing because it's one thing to take a class, you have to do well in it too. So you have to weigh that.
Okay, thank you so much. We do have another question saying that the family is a middle class family, which disqualifies for most financial aid, and their sophomore is interested in engineering, which is already a generally more competitive admissions process with her heart set more, on some highly selective colleges, which are already unpredictable in admissions, and after little of merit aid, she has just above average test score with the highest academic rigor like IB diploma and strong GPA. at a lower ranked, she doesn't have a lot of STEM activities in her school, but she has a wealth of extracurriculum activities that aren't STEM related, like Girl Scout, standing goal, Girl Scouts starting gold award, 2 varsity sports, 3 honor societies, 2 clubs, and lots of volunteering and summer jobs. So how do I support her dream for each schools while really trying to help her create a more target likely list? And also, how does she stand out for engineering programs enough to also get merit-based aid without having STEM extracurriculars?
Oh, that's a mouthful. So, I mean, I would say first and foremost, I mean, first of all, congratulations. Your daughter sounds incredibly involved and she's doing wonderful things. Having a gold award in Girl Scouts is a wonderful achievement. I love seeing that with students. I would say that the most important thing is going to be academic fit, first of all, so that if she wants to apply to schools for engineering, they're really going to be looking to make sure that she's got math through the highest rigor she can. I mean, in a perfect world, she would get through BC calculus. That's what colleges are looking for. If that's not possible, at least calculus by the time she graduates from high school. And then she needs to have an AP science, whether that be biochem or physics, in order to be competitive, and I put that in air quotes, for engineering schools. So, I mean, it sounds like she has lots of wonderful extracurriculars. It doesn't sound like they're, from what the mom is saying or the parent is saying, they're STEM oriented. So maybe consider in one of her STEM classes working on an independent project over the summer, something that interests her with regards to engineering. There's always that opportunity to do things independently, do your own research, create something. I would recommend that. With regards to financial aid and what that's going to look like, I mean, if, we are very lucky in Virginia to have amazing state universities. I grew up in Connecticut. There was one state university that was your only opportunity. So having all these wonderful schools in state is fantastic. And if finances are an issue, the ROI on going to a state university in Virginia is really can't be beat. So I would concentrate on being able to apply to those schools. And then there are STEM oriented schools outside of state who do offer aid. And, you never know how attractive she's going to look to a school because remember, every school is looking for something different. So there are some private universities out of state and other state universities out of state that do offer nice merit aid that can bring it a little bit more in line with in-state tuition.
Thank you. And we also have someone who chimed in saying that the Coalition for College does offer free waivers for applications, and they
Correct.
have posted that in the chat. Thank you, and we will share that as well. One more question. Does having siblings present at a college or alumni parents help?
So it depends on everything in college admissions is it depends. It depends on the school. That's called legacy status. And there are some schools that do factor in if you have a parent or a grandparent or a sibling who has attended that university. That also goes to that demonstrated interest. And then there are other schools where they don't factor that in. So it really just depends on the university.
Thank you. So we still have more time for more questions. If you wish, please put them in chat or the Q&A. And we will also encourage you to check the resources that every high school offers through their, counselors and the career and transition specialists in each school, because they can give you a lot of resources and guidance as well. And you have access as a parent to the Naviance account to see all the offerings and the scholarships. Just make sure that you are, reaching out to someone from the school, like the student counselor, to get some help and support with that. And also, we'll be sharing all the resources that have been shared in the chat today and some of the digital resources that we have gathered here in the FRC to help families to get to know more about the other opportunities and career and college pathways after graduation. Okay. It seems like we do not have more questions for today. Thank you so much for the wonderful information that you have shared. And it's always helpful to get all of this information for our families. And please, share whatever resources that you think that could be helpful for our families, and we will make sure to send them with a follow-up email. Thank you so much for the presentation and being with us today.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Amal. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank
Have
you
a
so
great day,
much.
You're welcome.
everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.